Good afternoon. If our family keeps growing, we'll need a new hotel. Of those who have much is expected, demanded, and all who have some measure of spiritual truth owe a great debt to the world. You know by now that just as individually, so collectively, mankind is only going to find peace, prosperity, harmonious human relationships as they find these through some spiritual factor. They're not going to find them just by finding some new way of becoming rich or by finding some new means of entertainment. We already have all of the elements for developing economic wealth. We have all of the factors for developing our cultural and artistic pursuits. The only one thing that we haven't got in the human world are the factors that make for happy human relationships. This is the only element missing in all of society that no one has discovered, no one has even pretended to discover. I'm sure that all who have followed the philosophical teachings, the mystical teachings, the very deep religious teachings, know full well that the missing factor is a spiritual one. So that means very few people on the face of the earth that are aware of this. You see, the religions of the world have never brought peace to the world. Rather, on the contrary, they have been responsible for most of the wars that have taken place on earth. There have only been two reasons on earth for wars. One has been church, and the other has been money or property. Aside from this, there never has been any reason for any of the wars that have taken place. Oh, I know we have used a lot of alibis and camouflage, like we were fighting for Christianity. That was usually one Christian sect fighting another Christian sect, and each one calling the other non-Christian. We have fought for democracy. Usually when we were fighting for democracy, we were in partnership with some dictatorship, and still fooling ourselves that we were fighting for democracy. No, there have only been two reasons on earth for wars, and one of these is church, and the other is money, property. The solution does not lie in finding new ways of bringing economic security to the world. Do not misunderstand me. The world needs all such efforts as are being made in the direction of a common market and a common currency. The world needs all of such. What I mean is that even when you have these, you haven't the guarantee of peace. Because there is no guarantee of peace. There is no assurance of peace among nations any more than among individuals, unless there is a spiritual bond between them. Without a spiritual bond, any two people in the world can get into a fight, or any three, or any dozen. Without a spiritual bond, any two families can get into warfare, or nations or races. With a spiritual bond, warfare is impossible. In a very small measure, we have witnessed an example of that in our Infinite Way family around the world, where in 17 years that we are functioning together, we have never had warfare between any two of our students or any group of our students, nor a lawsuit, nor a fight of any kind, nor a disagreement of any kind. The reason is there has been a spiritual bond. Or it doesn't mean that everyone who has undertaken the study of the Infinite Way has remained an Infinite Way student, not by any manner of means, because that could not possibly be. Inevitably, there will be thousands, tens of thousands of people undertake the study of the Infinite Way and drop away because it is not meant for them. It is not for their particular consciousness. We are all states and stages of consciousness, and therefore a religious teaching that might suit me might not suit you, or one that might suit you might not suit me. And so it is that there are many drawn to the study of this work and then find that it is not meant for them. They either cannot understand it, they cannot respond to it, or it does not satisfy something in their nature. And each one of us, remember, needs something to satisfy our inner self, and always it cannot be the same thing for every individual. And so it is that there will be those in the future who will come and go as there have been in the past. But what I meant is that there have been no warfares, there have been no divisions, there have been no lawsuits, there have been no occasions for anger, and the reason is that there is this spiritual bond. Now, as you watch this work, and remember that we are talking about students in the United States and in Canada, in England, in the Dominions, on the European continent, on Asiatic continents, and still, wherever there is a spiritual bond, there is peace, there is harmony, there is a sense of completeness. And so it is that anyone, anywhere, at any time, that catches a glimpse of the meaning of a spiritual bond has a great debt that they owe the world. and that is to share the nature of a spiritual bond so that all in the course of time may note it, may really come to this sense of peace that must exist on earth as it exists in heaven. Now, the question that comes to the thought of the younger student is, what about this spiritual bond? What is it exactly? What constitutes a spiritual bond? Here we have difficulty. Here we have the difficulty of bringing the fourth dimensional life down into a third dimensional language. Because a spiritual bond almost is as impossible to describe as God. And certainly no one in the world could describe God, analyze God, or explain God. And yet, God is known to man, to those who have become acquainted with God, those who have come to know God aright. And yet if you say to one of these, what is God? You get about the same answer that Jesus made when Pilate said, what is truth? They'll just turn away on their heels, that's all, without answering, because what is God? And you who have experienced some of the fruitage of God, even you must acknowledge that you wouldn't like to be called upon to answer that question. Now, a spiritual bond, even though we cannot accurately describe it, yet we not only can know it, we not only can show it forth to our neighbors in practical experience, but in a measure we can explain it to each other. At least we can explain it to those who come with a serious look in their eyes, as if they really were searching. A spiritual bond takes place when two people look each other in the eye and know that here is someone I trust. And remember, they need not be of your same religion. They need not be of your same faith. You must remember that in the eyes of God, there are no churches and there are no religions. Always remember that church and religion are man-made. They have no existence in God whatsoever. And God has no awareness of any churches or any religions. In other words, just as we sit here and have this spiritual relationship without the intervention of any man-made rules or any man-made institutions or any man-made edifices, so God looks into the eyes of his own. And between God and his children, you can be assured there are no edifices, there are no crucifixes, there are no stars, there are no insignia of any kind between God and his creation. There is only one thing, and that thing is love. And that love is the religion. That love is the tie that binds. That love that exists between God and man is the spiritual bond that unites God and man in an eternal relationship of oneness. Without this relationship of oneness, we would all be in a sad position today. Let us stop for a moment and think about this. The Master says, and remember, it is the Master saying it, Christ Jesus, the Son of God, I of my own self can do nothing. If I bear witness of myself, I bear witness to a lie. It is the Father that doeth the work. In the same way, it is revealed that when we become children of God, we become heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ. Now, as you ponder this is the unfoldment that takes place. I of my own self am nothing, but by virtue of my oneness with God, all that God is, I am, all that God hath is mine. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. The place whereon thou standest is holy ground, because I and the Father are one. Where I am, God is. Where God is, I am. Because of oneness. Oneness. Therefore, when I say that by my relationship to God, I have life eternal, and neither life nor death can separate me from God. Neither life nor death can separate me from the love of God. Neither life nor death can separate me from the life of God, the Spirit of God, the soul of God, because I and my Father are inseparable. We are one. Now, you know that the moment that I had declared this about myself, unless I include you, I am the supreme egotist. And that won't do. It is necessary in order for any individual, any individual to claim oneness with God, or sonship with God, or heirship with God, it is necessary to realize that since God is no respecter of persons, this must be a universal truth. Therefore, it makes no difference whether, in man's stupid way, he has created some kind of paganistic religion, Jewish religion, Christian religion, Mohammedan religion. None of that takes away from the fact of man's oneness with God, man's heirship with God, man's allness by virtue of oneness with God, and so that must mean all of us, regardless of what kind of a label we attach to ourselves. Now, in the moment that we have acknowledged, and this is what we've done, we've acknowledged the spiritual bond between I and my Father, an inseparable and an indivisible bond of oneness. Do you not see that automatically we have created that bond with each other? That every one of us who dares to claim that I and the Father are one, every one of us who dares to claim sonship with God, heirship with God, immediately has to declare a spiritual bond with every man, woman, and child on earth. And this, then, is the spiritual bond that we recognize. And the moment that any student of a truth movement should look into the eyes of any individual, that bond must spring into active life. Because since they are the ones who know this truth, they are the ones in whom this spiritual bond is first recognized and brought to life. So it is then that if we, regardless of the truth path that we follow, if we include in our teaching a sonship with God and heirship with God, then of us it is demanded that as we look into each other's eyes, that we recognize there the spiritual bond that exists between us because of that relationship with God. I and my Father are one, you and my Father are one, and I and your Father are one. We are to call no man on earth our Father, for there is but one Father. And do you not see what happens to us in that moment when we recognize this relationship, and the relationship, therefore, that follows between us? Do you see how out of this relationship, or rather from this relationship, there must drop away all sensuality, all lust, all greed? Because remember, this bond establishes us in the household of God, the family of God, the household of God, and between us there can be nothing but the relationship that exists between God and His children, or between all of the children of the household of God, and this must be spiritual, this must be pure, this must be unselfish. Now, if we can look upon each other in that light, if we can meet and recognize in each other's eyes our common family, the one Father, the one life, the one Spirit, the one soul, the one inheritance, you see that automatically and instantaneously we have created an indestructible bond between us. Now remember, it makes no difference whether we all decide next week, next month, next year that we're going to follow the infinite way, or Christian Science, or unity, or New Thought. And all of that has nothing to do with the fact that we have discovered our basic relationship. And we may have discovered it through any one of these teachings. But the point is that we have discovered it, and we recognize that we are of the household of God because of this spiritual bond that exists between us. Now, one step further is required of us, and this one we sometimes have to take alone for a while. This first step that we have just taken, you find we don't have to take alone, that instantly that it is brought to your attention, you agree on it, and instantly the bond has come to light between us. Or as you would look around among yourselves, among your neighbors, and recognize the truth of this, that bond would spring right into active expression, and never again would there be separation or division between you on the spiritual path, regardless of what human path you might follow. But this next step is more difficult, because now that we know that I and the Father are one, and now we know that you and the Father are one, it begins to dawn on in our consciousness that probably that man out there and his Father are one. And so we begin to meet our neighbors on our streets, in our flats, in our shops, and the responsibility is on our shoulder, not theirs. They may not yet be aware of this. It is on our shoulder to take a sneaking little look into their eyes and say, I recognize you. Of my own household. Better not look too large, they may think you're flirting. But a wee little bit of a look, just so that you look into there and see your Father shining out through their eyes. And that's the secret. That's the secret. When you can see your Father shining out through their eyes, you have established this bond with them. You've established this bond virtually with all mankind. And while at first they may not recognize it or respond to it, you can be assured of this: it isn't going to be very long before they too will begin to find a bond with you which they may not recognize as a spiritual bond. You know how often we meet people and say, I don't know why, but I like them. And the answer usually is that a spiritual bond exists between us, and it has come to light before we know the nature of it. But the point is that we have, by this act of recognizing our Father, looking out through their eyes, by this fact, we have established our brotherhood and sisterhood with them. We have established them in the household of God with us. We have established for them God as their Father, without their knowing it. And yet, whatever it is that happens, in the case of all who are in the least bit spiritually inclined, there is a response. Now, this really is the bond, the spiritual bond, that will ultimately bring peace on earth. This is the very bond that you will find can't be broken, can't be destroyed, does not permit anyone to war with each other. It just cannot happen. There is something about this witnessing of your Father in the other person's eyes that makes it impossible for you to lie to them or cheat or defraud. It is impossible. It may seem strange to you, but it is nevertheless still a fact. I received a letter this week from a lady who was having a great deal of difficulty because in her church she has met a married man with whom she has fallen in love, and she wants to know what to do about it. It doesn't seem possible. It is. Because the answer, if she really were looking for it, you can imagine that she isn't, But if she were, the answer is right there in her church and in her Bible. Do unto others as you have others do unto you. And then she'd be so far away from that particular church that they wouldn't be able to see her for flying dust. But you see, there is where there has been no recognition of a spiritual bond and therefore no feeling of an obligation toward anyone. Now, you cannot have a spiritual bond with anyone and not feel under an obligation to live with them in peace, in purity, in harmony, in completeness, in sharing even. Not sharing one's wife or one's husband. Too far. Too far. But you do see that only those who have risen above an isolated sense of religion, those who have risen above the sense of religion that, well, only I and mine are bound for heaven and all others are bound for the other place. Only those who have risen above this can have it demanded of them that they begin to establish the spiritual bond. All of the others draw a circle, and leave everybody else out. This can never happen to anyone who has accepted the statement, call no man on earth your father, there is but one Father. Because with that statement comes this realization, then we are children of God, then we are brothers and sisters in Christ, in spiritual relationship, and the very establishment of this bond, invisible bond, establishes our peace, our harmony, our benevolence, our conduct towards each other. It goes further than this. If by some chance something should arise that would seem to separate or divide us or set up a warfare between us, this spiritual bond that has taken place would prevent that ever happening. I have had this most wonderful experience that I had a chum, a pal, for 49 years. 49 years that there was never a misunderstanding between us. 49 years in which there were occasions when I would say, how about some money, and it was always available, and other times when he found it necessary to say, how about some money, and it was always available. And you know that during those 49 years of friendship, 2 wars divided us, and in both of them he was on the German side and I was on the American side. And never for 1 minute was the bond between us broken, and when he passed on, he paid me the honor to leave his family to me, a widow and 3 children. And they are my family now, and I'm their family. And I still visit them every year in Germany. You see, when a spiritual bond has taken place between people, what happens in this cockeyed human universe makes no difference. You recognize it as the insanity of mankind, but you never let it interfere with your relationship, with your brothers, with your sisters, with those of your spiritual household. Oh, certainly, it didn't happen. It could have happened that we might have been right opposite each other, shooting at each other. It didn't happen that way. It did happen in World War I that before World War I there were a group of us that met in a German city on our business trips, youngsters from all different countries, and at noon we had what was called an international Stammtisch. We all met for our coffee and donuts. And when World War I came, one of the English boys of this table and one of the German boys of this table met on the battlefield. And it happened to be the lot of the German boy to capture the English boy. It wasn't very long till they recognized each other and spoke to each other and slipped off to a side, and the German said, "Ah, I just fell on my face, I can't see you." And the English boy very quickly was back in his line. These things sound impossible until you have once felt a real bond with people, a bond that goes so high above human relationships that you recognize that you've come into a spiritual relationship. There exists this spiritual bond. Now, as a matter of truth and as a matter of fact, there is only one Creator. There is only one God. There is only one Father. And we of the earth, we are all children. We are all offspring of that one principle, of that one Creator. Even religions haven't claimed that there are two gods, that there are two creators. So even the religions can't claim that we aren't brothers and sisters, because it can't be otherwise if there's only one Creator. So that the bond of which I'm speaking already exists between every man, woman, and child on earth, and those who have passed from the earth, and those who have not yet been born. The bond already exists. We are not called upon to create it or to make it. We are only called upon to recognize that it exists. We are only called upon to look into each other's eyes and see that my Father is shining right out of your eyes. I can see my Father in your eyes, and if you can't see your Father in my eyes, you're spiritually blind, and your eyes need opening. When your spiritual eye is opened, you can look all around you and say, why, yes, there's the photograph of my own Father in my neighbor's eye. We are of the household of God. And then there exists this spiritual bond. With us, we can acknowledge it to each other. To the outside world, we can't. We don't speak like this. We only act like this. We act toward each other as if we were spiritual brothers and sisters. We act. It is expected of us, because we know this truth. It is expected of us that we act in a spiritual manner toward each other. But wisdom says, cast not your pearls before swine. Do not tell the unprepared thought. Keep it to yourself. Act it. Live it. Recognize the spiritual bond, but keep your fingers on your lips until such time as someone indicates their readiness to know this, to be told this, and usually they have a way of letting it be known that they want to know what you know, or they want to have what you have, and at the right time, the unveiling can take place. You can reveal the photograph of your father behind your eyes, and then tell them to look into their own and find that same photograph there. For there's only one Father, the Father in heaven. You know that when this spiritual bond exists between us, it really makes no difference what human differences arise. We can find an adjustment for it. Just like in members of a family. It really makes no difference what arguments, what differences, what problems may come up in a family. If there is love, they can always work it out and find a solution without going to court and without shooting each other. It is only where there is an absence of love, where there is an absence of that family relationship, even though the blood relationship may be there, there isn't a recognized family relationship. We've all known that. There, you may have to settle your arguments in court. All the more does this bring to your mind that even such a thing as blood relationship doesn't prevent war. Only the spiritual bond, not the recognition that my human father and your human father was the same. Heaven knows the courts of the world are filled with suits between children of the same parents. It is only in the recognition of the divine fatherhood, the common fatherhood of the divine Father, the one Father, the universal Father, the spiritual Father, then in the realization of our spiritual bond, we not only have our oneness with God, but we have our oneness with each other. And it is right here that a great miracle takes place that you can never account for in any human way. Now watch this very carefully. This is the theme of my original manuscript, Metaphysical Notes, and it's now in book form. I think it is Conscious Union with God. The theme is this: my conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Now, it was a tremendous discovery, and it has been proven in the experience of those of us who have lived through the years with this, that in the moment that I realize my oneness with God and realize that whatever I am is really the qualities of God that are working in me or through me, whatever degree of intelligence, whatever degree of love, whatever degree of life, whatever degree of integrity, whatever degree of anything that is manifesting through me is really the qualities of the Father being expressed. The moment I realize this, that of myself I have no qualities, of myself I can be neither good nor evil, but by virtue of my oneness with God, all of the qualities of God can be made manifest through me. In the moment that I know this, without my knowing how or why, my relationship with you is established, with your spiritual side, with your spiritual identity. It is established. It makes no difference if I am 20,000 miles away and you have never heard of me. Nevertheless, we are going to meet. It is inevitable. We're not only going to meet, we're going to meet in a joyous way, a fruitful way, a beneficial way. Because in my contact with my Father, I have been given contact with all those who are a part of my household, and of whom I may be a part of their household. In other words, immediately that I recognize my oneness with God, I am placed in contact or oneness with all who belong to me. And I am placed in contact with all to whom I belong. And I have nothing to do with it. I do not plan it. I do not advertise it. I do nothing of a human nature. And yet, whatever is necessary to my unfoldment, whether in the form of a patient or a student or a publisher or a whatever it may be, always it falls right into line at the time that it is needed without looking for it. So you will discover that in the moment that you make the agreement that you and your Father are one, that the qualities of the Father are really the qualities that are being made manifest through you. In other words, your goodness is not your goodness. You can say with the Master, "Why callest thou me good? There is only one good, the Father in heaven." Therefore, if there is any goodness or any benevolence or any virtue shining through, you can make the acknowledgement, it is the Father shining through me. The astounding thing is that in the moment that you have made this acknowledgement, you have made contact with everybody and with everything that is necessary to play a part in your experience here on earth. Some of them you may only meet 5 years from now, but you will meet them at the moment when they fit into the scheme of your experience. Automatically, this consciousness of oneness with God establishes oneness with all of God's children. And it is inevitable that if there is any occasion on earth whereby we can serve each other, it is inevitable we will meet. So it is. You, at any moment in which you make the acknowledgement that you are one with God, and that all that the Father hath is yours, and only that which is the Father hath is yours, and that of yourself you are nothing, but all that God is shining through you. In the moment of your recognition of this, you have made contact all over this globe with persons and things and conditions that are necessary to your fulfillment on earth. Now, you never will lack for the person or persons or the condition or conditions necessary to your harmonious unfoldment. Never. Never. You have made yourself one with every person and every thing necessary in your experience the moment you have made a spiritual bond with God, because in making a spiritual bond with God, you have made your spiritual bond with all spiritual beings, the offspring of God, the creation of God, whether it's a blade of grass, whether it's a garden, whatever it may be that is going to fulfill you whether it is a home, employment, whatever it is that is going to fulfill your experience on earth, you have made contact with in the moment that you have established the spiritual bond first between you and your Father, and then automatically between all the rest of us. Because now in this oneness you will find the secret that was planted in Scripture by Christ Jesus. Why it was planted there as a secret must be known to him. But it's no longer a secret to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. When I was in prison, ye visited me. When I was naked, ye clothed me. When I was an hungered, ye fed me. So forth. Master, Master, when were you ever in prison and we visited you? When were you ever hungry and we fed you? When were you ever naked and we clothed you? Inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. In other words, the least of these my brethren is me. The least of these my brethren is the very Christ or Son of God. And the only way in which you can serve the Christ or God is in serving what may even be the least of these my brethren, because it is followed with, when I was in prison ye did not visit me, when I was an hungered ye did not feed me, when I was naked ye did not clothe me. Master, Master, when saw we thee that way and did not do unto you? Inasmuch as ye did it not unto the least of these my brethren, ye did it not unto me. Therefore, do you not see that no life is real, no life is spiritual, no life is really being lived until you do acknowledge that the least of these my brethren is also the Christ. Therefore, a bond exists between us. Whether we are the greatest of these or the least of these, a bond exists between us, because whatever you do to me, you are doing unto the Christ. Whatever I do unto you, I am doing unto the Christ. What you leave undone to me that you might have done, you've left undone to the Christ. What I leave undone to you that I might have done for you or to you, I have left undone to the Christ. Do you not see now why this bond between us makes it impossible for us to withhold from each other, lie, cheat, steal, defraud? Do you see why it is impossible when you have recognized your sonship with God, you have recognized mine, and then what you have done unto me, you've done unto yourself. And what you haven't done unto me, you haven't done unto yourself. And so, as you look around this world, even at the people who have no spiritual light, no spiritual wisdom, don't forget they are still the least of these my brethren that we are called upon to serve. The fact that they may be in ignorance of their relationship to God or to us does not excuse us. Those who know, those who have the most, of them the most is demanded. And so it is that of us it is demanded that we start at the earliest possible moment to bring to light, to bring to conscious awareness, this spiritual bond that exists between all of us on the face of the globe, so that this peace may be hastened. No longer entertain thoughts of hate or fear of the so-called enemy, but rather an inner acknowledgement that even by chance, if you are the least of these my brethren, I am still doing good unto you. I am still blessing you, forgiving you, praying for you. If by chance it may be that we are the least of these my brethren, because sometimes we think we're the right ones and oh how wrong we can be. Even if we then happen to be the least of these my brethren, we have the consolation of knowing that every person on the face of the globe who has learned of this spiritual bond is forgiving us and praying for us and lifting us up to where we belong in consciousness. Only a spiritual bond existing between us can keep us forever in love with each other and keep that love floating, keep that love fruitful, harmonious, and pure. Take this spiritual bond away from us, and we're just a mass of human beings clawing at each other pretty soon. Because without the spiritual bond, we are that man whose breath is in his nostril, or that natural man who receiveth not the things of God. It is this spiritual bond that exists between us that makes us of one household, gives us just one Father, makes us heirs, but joint heirs to all of the heavenly riches. For a moment, I'm going to say aloha to you for the moment. And Godspeed, and God bless.